London, 1814. The capital hummed with victory songs and scandalous whispers, as though society itself was drunk on the fading scent of war. Inside the chandelier-lit ballroom of the Earl of Pembroke, the Duke of Wessex stood like a statue of marble and restraint. Alastair Hawthorne, 31 years old and heir to one of England's oldest titles, was a man polished to precision by generations of expectation. His posture commanded attention, yet his eyes betrayed fatigue, a soldier's weariness behind a nobleman's calm. He was a duke who did not believe in love, not anymore. Around him, silk skirts swirled and fans fluttered like the wings of restless birds. Music swelled, laughter rippled, and names were exchanged like currency. Yet even in that glittering hive of wealth and grace, the night belonged to one woman, Lady Evelyn Caraway, his intended bride by arrangement. She moved through the crowd in a gown the color of soft rosewater, her golden hair coiled with pearls that shimmered under candlelight. The young men paused mid-conversation when she passed. Older matrons whispered approvingly. She was, by all appearances, a triumph of breeding and beauty. But Alastair, the man she was promised to, stood unmoved. He had learned long ago that beauty could deceive as easily as war could maim. His engagement to Evelyn had been orchestrated by his mother and her father, a union of two great fortunes, and though he had accepted it without protest, his heart remained cold. The wars had taught him to distrust all gentle words. He had seen men die for honor, women lie for survival, and hearts corrupted by desire disguised as devotion. From behind a marble pillar, two ladies of society, unaware that Alastair was near, spoke in voices hushed yet sharp enough to cut through the music. "She is charming, yes," said one, with a gloved hand poised elegantly over her fan, "but her charm is learned, not felt. The Lady Evelyn's heart is as thin as her waistline." "Indeed," replied the other. "She smiles at the Duke because she must. I dare say, were he not Wessex, she'd look right past him." Alastair did not flinch. He simply turned away, though the words sank deeper than he cared to admit. It was not wounded pride that stirred in him, but an old bitterness, the sense that affection toward him had always been for the title, not the man. Even his mother had spoken of duty as if it were a necklace to be worn gracefully, never questioned. Evelyn noticed him then, standing aloof at the edge of the ballroom. Their eyes met briefly, and for a fleeting moment her expression softened with something genuine, something almost tender. Yet Alastair, armored by skepticism, mistook it for performance. She curtsied, he inclined his head, and the music continued. Later that evening, as rain began to whisper against the windows, Alastair stepped out onto the terrace where his old comrade, Major Ellison, waited with a glass of brandy in hand. Ellison, a man of frank speech and scarred hands, had served under Alastair in the peninsula. "You look as though you'd rather face cannon fire than another dance," Ellison remarked dryly. Alastair gave a faint smile. "Cannon fire is honest. These rooms are not." Ellison raised a brow. "You speak of the lady?" "I speak of deception," Alastair replied. "I have lived among soldiers who bled for honor. Yet in this world, I am praised for lineage alone. Tell me, how am I to trust affection that follows wealth like a shadow?" The Major's gaze grew thoughtful. "Then test it, my friend. But beware, you may find truth to be the cruelest victory of all." That night, as Alastair returned to his estate, the idea took root in him like a thorn. To test the heart of a woman who might one day bear his name, to see if she could love him stripped of every ornament of privilege. Perhaps it was madness born of pride. Perhaps it was the hunger of a man who had seen too much falsehood. Either way, once the notion seized him, it would not let go. Weeks later, London season was waning, and word spread quietly that the Duke of Wessex had departed for the continent again. In truth, Alastair was bound not for war, but for Dorsetshire, where the Caraways kept their country estate. In a small coaching inn, he exchanged his tailored coat for the worn uniform of a common infantry officer, stained and patched. His signet ring he left behind. His horse he traded for a humble bay gelding. The Duke of Wessex became Captain Ashton, a weary soldier seeking modest work and lodging. When he arrived at the Caraway grounds, the day was veiled in grey mist. The manor rose from the moors, proud yet softened by age, ivy clinging to its stone walls. The air smelled faintly of rain and earth. A stable boy, no older than 16, led him to the overseer's cottage, where Alastair presented his forged papers and requested employment. Within the hour, he was placed among the grooms and labourers. None recognized him, few even looked at him twice. He saw her again that evening, not in satin, but in simplicity. Lady Evelyn descended the back steps of the manor dressed in a modest riding cloak, her hair loosely tied. She carried a bundle of linens and a small lantern, moving swiftly toward the stables. Alastair, mucking a stall, stilled his hands and watched. She knelt beside an injured soldier hidden in the shadows, a young man, his uniform torn and bloodied. Her voice, when she spoke, was gentle yet commanding. "Lie still," she whispered. "You're safe now. No one here will betray you." Alastair's breath caught. This was not the idle heiress society mocked. This was a woman risking her name, her safety, perhaps her soul. When she lifted her head, their eyes met for the first time without the veil of formality between them. He saw exhaustion there, and quiet courage. Later, alone in his narrow quarters, he stared at the faint glow of the candle and replayed the sight in his mind. Every certainty he had held began to tremble. If she was indeed hiding soldiers, deserters, perhaps, she was breaking the law, and yet, she was also defying cruelty. By morning, the Duke's test no longer felt like a game of wit but a descent into something dangerous, something real. His disguise had become a chain he could not remove without unraveling the truth. As dawn crept over the hills, Alastair stood in the stable yard, watching Lady Evelyn cross the field again, her cloak billowing like a storm-tossed flag. The man who had come to judge her now found himself drawn instead to the mystery she carried. He told himself it was curiosity. But deep down, a more treacherous word was taking root. He would stay. He would learn what drove her to such defiance. And perhaps in uncovering her secret, he might finally discover what love truly meant, if only it did not destroy them both. Autumn fell over Dorsetshire like a slow-burning candle, dimming the world into hues of rust and gold. The Caraway estate, once lively with summer guests, now stood quieter, its corridors echoing only with the sound of distant hooves and whispered errands. Captain Ashton, Duke Alastair Hawthorne in disguise, had spent nearly 3 weeks among the servants, his fine hands now roughened, his speech adjusted to the humble rhythms of common men. The first days had been an exercise in humility. Now, they had become a strange sort of revelation. Each morning he watched Lady Evelyn from afar, tending to her secret duties with quiet determination. The woman he had imagined vain and sheltered moved with purpose through mud and mist. She carried food to the outbuildings, washed linen stained with blood, and soothed frightened men who hid behind barn doors and beneath floorboards. What had begun as curiosity for him was shifting into reverence. Yet every act of compassion she offered also deepened his torment, because her secret, if exposed, could cost her everything. He discovered, too, that the household lived in tension. The servants adored her but kept their loyalty through silence. Her father, Lord Caraway, believed she spent her days in embroidery and charity calls. In truth, his daughter was defying him, and the crown itself. Each night, Alastair saw the faint glow of a lantern moving across the orchard path toward the mill, and each night he followed, unseen, watching her meet men in ragged uniforms. They were deserters, wounded soldiers who had fled the army's cruelty and execution squads. She fed them, sheltered them, and arranged secret passage toward the coast. Alastair wrestled with himself. To love her now meant to protect what the Duke of Wessex should condemn. If he were discovered, his deception would ruin her trust. If she were discovered, the gallows would take her. The irony was merciless. His test of love had entangled them in a far greater deceit than he ever planned. One gray afternoon, as rain misted over the fields, Evelyn found him repairing the stable gate. She approached softly, a folded cloak in her arms. "Captain," she said, her voice delicate but certain, "you work as though the world depended on every nail." He looked up, rain beating on his lashes. "Perhaps it does, my lady. The smallest task can sometimes hold the largest consequence." She smiled faintly, handing him the cloak. "Then take this, for consequences' sake. You'll catch your death if you stay out in this weather." When their hands touched, her gloved fingers brushed against his bare ones, just a heartbeat's contact, yet enough to alter the air between them. Something unspoken trembled there, as though the autumn wind itself held its breath. In the following days, their exchanges grew bolder. She began to speak of her late brother, Thomas, who had died dishonored on the field, falsely accused of cowardice and abandoned by the officers who should have protected him. "The men I help," she confessed one evening, "they remind me of him. Not traitors, Captain, only broken souls who deserved mercy." Her words struck him deeply. He remembered his own soldiers, boys who bled for glory they never lived to see. He could have told her then who he was, how his wealth and rank had shielded him from the same cruelties that crushed lesser men. But shame held his tongue. He wanted, just a little longer, to be seen as she saw him, a man of courage, not privilege. The rain turned harsher in the weeks that followed. Mud swallowed the paths, and the fields stood bare. Yet the meetings in the mill continued, until one evening a rumor reached the estate. An officer of the Crown was travelling through Dorsetshire, investigating rumors of treason. Panic murmured through the servants' quarters. Evelyn's maid, pale with fear, warned her to cease her secret work. But Evelyn, stubborn and radiant with conviction, refused. That night, Alastair found her in the stables, burning letters by lantern light. She looked up as he entered, the fire's reflection glinting in her eyes. "If they come," she said softly, "they must find nothing." "They will come," he replied. "And when they do, you must not be here. I cannot abandon them." "Then you will hang," he said, his voice breaking through restraint. "And I—" He stopped himself. The words trembled between confession and silence. Outside, thunder rolled low across the hills. Evelyn turned to him, her expression both wounded and resolute. "You speak as though you care, Captain." "Why?" He hesitated only a moment. "Because the world rarely deserves the mercy you give it." She looked at him for a long time, then stepped closer, her breath warming the air between them. "Then help me, if you mean what you say." And he did. That night, when soldiers arrived unannounced to the gates, Alastair met them first. The officer demanded to search the outbuildings. In the flickering light of torches, Alastair produced forged orders from the War Office, documents he had signed himself months ago as the Duke. The officer, deceived by the authority of the seal, relented and departed after a cursory search. When the danger passed, Evelyn found him outside the stables, soaked through and trembling from cold and fury. "You risked your life," she said, her voice low, "for men you barely know." "For you," he replied simply. She stared at him as if seeing him anew. The rain fell harder, streaking across her pale cheeks like tears. From within her cloak she drew a small silver locket, delicate and engraved with roses. She pressed it into his palm. "Take this. It was my mother's." A token, perhaps, for courage shown in silence. He wanted to tell her the truth, that the seal on those forged papers was his own, that he was not her savior but the man she had every right to despise. But her trust disarmed him more than any weapon could. Days later, while delivering grain to the mill, a folded letter slipped from a courier's bag onto the dirt path. Alastair bent to retrieve it, his pulse quickening as he recognized the wax insignia, the crest of Wessex. The message inside confirmed his greatest fear. The Duke of Wessex, his own assumed self, was reported missing at sea. And worse, the letter had been addressed to Lady Evelyn Carroway. That evening, when she entered the stables with her lantern, her eyes were rimmed red from tears. "Captain," she said faintly, "they say the Duke is dead." Her voice trembled on the name. "My father is distraught. I hardly knew the man, yet to be widowed before marriage feels a strange kind of mourning." Alastair could only stare, the words clawing at his throat. Her grief was not for a title, nor for the wealth it promised. It was for duty unfulfilled, for a bond broken before it could begin. And he, the man she mourned, stood inches away, hidden by his own deceit. As she turned to leave, the lantern's light caught the silver locket at his throat, the very one she had given him. She froze, her gaze flicking from the locket to his face. Confusion crept over her features, followed swiftly by realization. "Where," she whispered, "did you get that?" The storm outside surged against the shutters, wind howling like judgment. He opened his mouth, but the truth refused to come. In that moment, both knew the masquerade could not last. The test he had begun out of pride was about to unravel, and with it, every certainty either of them had ever known. The silence between them was a living thing, sharp, trembling, and cruel. The lantern in Evelyn's hand wavered, its flame flickering against the wooden walls, casting the truth into terrible relief. Alastair stood motionless, rainwater dripping from his coat, every excuse dying on his tongue. She stared at him as though she were seeing a ghost. "You," she whispered, the word barely forming. "You're not a soldier." He took a step forward, his voice low and rough. "Evelyn." "Don't," she interrupted, her hand trembling. "Tell me who you are." He hesitated only a heartbeat before answering. "Alastair Hawthorne," he said quietly. "The Duke of Wessex." The name fell between them like thunder. Evelyn drew back as though struck, her face pale beneath the lamplight. "You lied to me," she breathed. "All this time, you watched me, questioned me, let me trust you. Was it amusement, then? Some cruel game for a bored nobleman?" He took another step, his voice tightening with regret. "No. It began as suspicion, yes. I needed to know if you cared for the title or the man beneath it. But what I found was more than I ever expected." Her laughter came brittle and broken. "A test," she said bitterly. "You tested me, like one measures a horse before purchase." Her eyes glistened with fury and humiliation. "Did you think me so shallow, so small, that you had to disguise yourself to see my worth?" "I thought I was protecting myself," he said, his tone trembling between pride and shame. "But you proved me wrong at every turn. You risked your life for men the world has forgotten. Evelyn, I could not leave. I could not look away." Her breath shuddered, torn between disbelief and the fragile ache of betrayal. The storm outside had deepened, rain striking the stable roof like the pounding of war drums. "You speak of honor," she said, "but your deceit endangered everything. If anyone discovers that the Duke of Wessex was here, aiding me under false pretenses, it will destroy you, and me with you." He stepped closer, his hand reaching for hers, but she recoiled. "Evelyn, listen to me. I can protect you. Whatever you've done, I will bear it." "You already have," she whispered. "Your name, your word, those forged letters. They all tie you to me now. You cannot untangle us without ruin." A long pause stretched between them, heavy as the rain. Then, suddenly, the stable door burst open. Lord Carroway stood framed in the doorway, flanked by 2 soldiers of the crown. His face was white with rage. "So it is true," he hissed. "My daughter consorting with deserters, and in the company of a stranger who bears my future son-in-law's death upon his tongue." Evelyn stiffened. "Father, please." "Silence." His voice cracked through the air. "I have tolerated your foolish charities long enough. But this treason ends tonight." The soldiers advanced, seizing Alastair before he could speak. His hat fell to the ground, and in the lantern's glow the signet ring, retrieved from his pocket earlier that night, caught the light. Lord Carroway froze. His eyes darted from the ring to Alastair's face. "That seal," he whispered. "It cannot be." "I am Alastair Hawthorne," the Duke said evenly, no longer hiding. "And your daughter's cause is just." The realization struck the old lord speechless. Then his fury redoubled. "You disgrace the name of Wessex by stooping to this madness. Do you understand what you have done? You aid traitors, harbor criminals, defy the crown itself." "I understand," Alastair said, "and I will answer for it. But not before I see her safe." Evelyn stepped between them, her voice breaking but clear. "He did this because of me. If punishment must be given, then give it to me alone." "No," Alastair said, turning toward her. "You taught me mercy when I had none. I will not repay it with cowardice." The soldiers hesitated, uncertain whether to act. The storm outside howled like a living thing, shaking the rafters. Then, from beyond the estate gates, came the thunder of hooves, another patrol arriving, their torches blazing through the rain. There was no time for persuasion, no chance for reason. "Go!" Alastair whispered fiercely to Evelyn. "Take the men and flee toward the coast. The night will hide you." "And you?" she asked, eyes wide with fear. "I will delay them. They'll kill you." He smiled faintly. "Perhaps. But I would rather die a man who chose love than live one who doubted it." Her tears fell freely now, glinting in the flickering light. "You fool," she whispered. "You foolish, noble man." Then, with trembling hands, she touched his face, a fleeting, desperate gesture of forgiveness, and fled into the storm. Moments later, the gates burst open and the courtyard filled with soldiers. The Duke of Wessex met them head-on, cloak whipping in the wind, his voice ringing through the chaos. "I am the man you seek. These grounds are under my authority. No harm shall come to the Lady Caraway." What followed was confusion and defiance. Lord Caraway shouted orders, but the soldiers hesitated at the sound of the Duke's name. The authority of his rank outweighed their suspicions. For now, it was enough. By the time they searched the grounds, Evelyn and the fugitives were gone. When dawn came, the storm had passed. Alastair stood alone in the courtyard, mud streaking his uniform, exhaustion heavy in every line of his face. Lord Caraway's fury had burned itself to ash. "You have destroyed her future," he said coldly. "No," Alastair answered. "I have given her freedom." Within days, word spread quietly through London, of a duke who had vanished once more, and a lady who had retreated from society. The official story spoke of illness, of a broken engagement and an extended stay abroad. But those who knew whispers better than truth told another tale, that the Duke had gone to France on personal business, and that Lady Evelyn's estate had fallen strangely quiet, her whereabouts unknown. Months later, on a wind-swept shore near Calais, a man in a weathered coat stood waiting beside a small fishing vessel. When the tide rose, a hooded figure approached, her cloak torn by salt wind. She paused a few feet away, her breath catching as she saw his face beneath the morning light. "You came," she said softly. "I promised," he replied. Evelyn lifted her hood, revealing eyes that had seen both ruin and grace. "They say England will not forgive us." "Then let us forgive each other first," he murmured. For a moment, neither spoke. The gulls wheeled above, and the world seemed suspended in the quiet between heartbeats. Then, wordlessly, she stepped forward and took his hand. Behind them, the horizon burned with the pale fire of dawn. Ahead, the boat waited, small, fragile, but enough. As they boarded, Alastair turned one last time toward the misted cliffs of England. His voice was barely a whisper. "Once, I thought love a deception. Now I know it is the only truth worth risking a kingdom for." Evelyn's hand tightened in his, her expression soft but steady. "Then let us build ours on that truth, wherever the sea takes us." The sails caught the wind, and the vessel drifted from the shore, carrying with it two souls stripped of titles and illusions, bound not by duty, but by a love that had survived its own trial by fire. The waves swallowed their wake, and soon only the wind remained, whispering across the open water the story of a duke who tested his heart and lost everything, only to find it reborn in the woman he once sought to judge.